Okay, we're on Daf Ayin Gimel in the middle of the Maimer. The Alter Rebbe continues that in order for us to understand what we had talked about, that even though Yaakov is the lesser level than Yisrael, which is Zah, nevertheless, there is a certain virtue to the characteristic of Yaakov. And if so, we have to understand how this is going to mesh with our rule that weekday Chol is Yaakov and Shabbos is Yisrael. I mean, we can't say that there's a virtue in the weekday over Shabbos. However, this is not a contradiction. That first of all, the level of Zah is higher than the level of Yaakov in general. And Zah is rooted even in a level that is higher than Abba v'Ima. Remember, Zah is the Midos, Abba and Ima is the Moichen. Like we know from Zah that it is rooted even in Atik, which is higher than Moichen, higher than thought, Chachma and Bina. Even more so, there is a certain virtue to the quality of Yaakov. Since it is the illustration of Yesod Abba, it is founded in the Father. That is, it is the product of the Hashem himself. This level can be found on Shabbos and Zah in an even greater way. Why? Because as we talked about on Shabbos, Zah, which is the Midos, are elevated and become embedded within Atzmis of the Abba itself, again, of the intellect, to the point that Zah reaches the level of Abba Mamish. So that on Shabbos, you have both milas. You have the level of Zah, the way it's in Atzmis, within the level of Abba. What does this mean in Avodas Hashem? So we know that there are two levels in general. We talk about serving Hashem like a servant and like a son. That even though in general, we would consider the son to be the more intense level of relationship because the son fulfills his father's wishes out of love. Nevertheless, there is a certain virtue that exists within the Eved, which is the quality of bittul, which is beyond any rational explanation. As we know from the concept that Chachma founds the earth, even though Chachma is the loftiest and Aretz is the least, that Yireh Tata, which is rooted in Chachma Illah, that is basic human sense of awe, which is rooted in Chachma, and therefore when it says bezois in this, which is a reference to Chachma Illah, that's the description of how Aaron enters into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And this is the distinctive virtue that is found in the quality of Yaakov, who is referred to as Hashem's servant, even relative to the level of Yisrael, who was called Hashem's son. And that's why you have to have both levels. It's not one to the exclusion of the other, or to the elimination of the other. Like it says in the Zayir and Parshas Balak that there are two levels of Eved. One, when we are in the Psukkah de Zimra, we are simply, quote, lauding and admiring Hashem. And two is when Shemon Esrei in total bittul. And in between, you have Shema. So as it's explained, that the four oasis of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Yud is the Chilu, the fear of Hashem, the Hey is Rechimu, the love of Hashem. The Arizal writes that when a person is saying Psukkah de Zimra, he does the will of Hashem out of Yirah. It's a human Yirah Tata, that comes from the second Hey of Shem Havaya. And this is the first level, the sort of introductory level of the slave, and he does what he's told. The level of Yaakov Abdi. Then in the brachas of Kriya Shema and Kriya Shema itself, where you have V'ahavta, which is the gematria of double the number for this is the two levels of the love of Hashem, the love of a son, like it says in Tanya, in the name of the Raya Mehemda, like a child who longs for his parent more than he longs for himself. And this is the idea that he's willing to have Mesiras Nefesh. Then you come to the level of Shemon Esrei, which is a loftier level, Yireh, that is higher even than the Ava of the son, because the Bina is the level of Ava Rabba, and it's called Ben Yud Kei. This level of Yireh, though, that a person experiences in Shemon Esrei is the level of Chachma Illah. That's the Yud of Shem Havaya, where the true reverence of Hashem rests. And this is that superior level of Eved, like Moshe, who is called an Eved. And Yaakov is Yud Akev, that is drawing down the level of Yud all the way down to the Akev, to the heel. Again, Chachma founding the earth, highest to lowest. But the Etzem level of Yud is Moshe Abdi. And now we understand this idea of Shabbos, which is called Yisrael, which is called the son. It is also the level of the servant, which is the level of Moshe Abdi, the superior level of the servant. And this is what we say in the Shachar davening on Shabbos. Yismach Moshe mematnes chelkai ki evad neman karasalai. Be joyous, Moshe, with the gift of your portion. For a trusted servant, he is called. This is that level of Ben that is elevated to also incorporate that superior, mature level of Eved. And this is the term called Eved Neman. This is the level of Zah that is called Ben Yud K, in which it is embedded the atzmis of Iris of the level of Abba, the level of Chachma, which is Yireh. And this Yireh also includes the level of Simcha. Like it says, all of his hearts are fearful of him. Nevertheless, within them, he is singing to his name. And Yismach Moshe, be joyous, Moshe, for you are my servant. That ends this mimer. We're still in Daf Ayin Gimel. We're starting now at Daf Ayin Gimel. Tovu alecha Yaakov. So Bilam says, how goodly are the tents of Yaakov. So we have a statement that whoever refers to Avram as Avram is in violation of a prohibition, because the pasuk says he should never again be called Avram. Why then is it that it's acceptable to call Yaakov Yaakov? Why not only call him Yisrael? So we explain what's the difference is the pasuk itself goes and calls him Yaakov, meaning once Hashem names Avraham, he's never again referred to as Avram, whereas once he's named Yaakov into Yisrael, he's still referred to as Yaakov in Torah. Now, what does this teach us? That you cannot reach the level of Yisrael unless you first have the introductory level of Yaakov. Regarding Yaakov, it says, so in context, it's Esav saying that he tricked me twice. But here we understand this idea. Why is it that, in order to understand this idea, we have to understand a broader concept, a basic concept. What is the purpose of a neshama coming into this world? And only so that it should receive reward in Gan Eden? Before it came into this world, it was in Gan Eden. So what does it need to come down here for? What's to be gained? So there's many answers, but the true answer, as the Alter Rebbe describes it, the Teretz Amiti is, like it says in Pirkei Avos, it's preferable, it's more beautiful, one moment of tshuva and good deeds in this world than all the world to come. And like the Gemara tells us, in the place where the Baal Tshuva stands, the completely righteous can't stand. Now, neshama, before it comes into this body, is also like the level of the tzaddik gomer. But what then is there to be added by bringing it into this body? It is to add this quality of Baal Tshuva, which is higher even than the level of tzaddik. Now, there are three levels of tshuva. One is tshuva tata. That is, you stop doing bad stuff, that you do not allow avedas to disrupt your relationship with Hashem, not in your conscious thoughts, not in your spoken words, and not in your deeds. And you have to do tshuva. You have to regret the past, and you have to uproot even the interest in it. So you should never want to, again, be separated from Hashem. That's the tshuva that we have in davening. We say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu. You, Hashem, are my authority. That I draw down this level of Elokeinu within myself, that it penetrates my real world, my Malik Olam, like in Parshas Vayelech it says that there is no other God within me. And we also know that any Averas will separate me from Hashem. So any Avera is going to be a blockage of my relationship with Hashem. As it's explained, when we declare Hashem as Elokeinu, we say this, that he is our God. We use the Elokim word. Why? Because in order for it to be Elokai B'kirbi, which is Elokeinu, is only through tzimtzum, which Elokim always suggests tzimtzum. Like the idea that Hashem was mitzamtzem his presence between the carrying staffs of the Aron Kodesh, that this seems odd. We know that the whole world is filled with Hashem. The heavens and earth I fill. And it only mentions the level of tzimtzum by the staffs that are implanted or are attached to the Aron Kodesh to carry it. The point being that even though it says the heavens and the earth I fill, nevertheless, it's not radiant in an obvious way. It's still concealed. Hashem is still called the hidden of all hiddens. But there, between the carrying sticks of the Aron Kodesh, Hashem's light is revealed. Like it's explained that Elokus doesn't have this idea of histalkus and hispashtus, expression and detachment. It's always going to be hidden. The heavens and the earth I fill, but it's still hidden. And however, between the staffs, the carrying staffs of the Aron Kodesh, it's revealed. Similarly, within a person, his thoughts radiate even down to his feet, like we'll explain. But there, it's hidden. But in the Mayach, it's clear, and it's not hidden. And in order that godliness should radiate in a way that's visible, is only through tzimtzum. This is the gilui of tzimtzum by Hashem, like speech, which reveals to someone else what the teacher is thinking. Similarly, when we call him Elokeinu, ours, this is only through tzimtzum. And that's why it is only Elokim that can be called ours, because again, of its relationship and its suggestion of tzimtzum. And this is the tshuva of Elokai B'kirbi. However, we ask a question that says ki chelik havaya amoy, which seems to say it's havaya, not elokim. So that seems to contradict the point that we just made, like it's explained there in the Igeres HaTshuva. So why are we asserting that it's only over the level of elokim that we can say it's ours, when here we have a pasuk that seems to suggest it's true of havaya? But the point is, we say havaya likenu. That means to say that the shem havaya is mamish what is embedded in the elokeinu. That certainly within every neshama there is shem havaya. However, the mechanism through which it is manifest in the neshama is through the shem elokim. The shem havaya is the life force, and the shem elokim is the keli through which that life force is manifest in this world. And this is what it's explained in the Zohar and the Moshe Zukatai, that it always attaches the two together. Chelik havaya is the four letters of Shem Hashem, the four Olamais, each one having their own identity. And even though there's this distinction between Biyah and Atzilus, that is, it's a keli for the Olamais, but not for the Or Pnimi that is invested within them, because it's rooted in Shem Havaya, Yud Atzilus, Hey Bria, Vav and Yitzir and Asiya, etc. So here the Alter Rebbe goes on and explains how it's possible again to say that every Jew has a Shem Havaya. We're now on Gimel Amid Gimel, which is the level of Atzilus itself. That is the Atzilus Elyon, or Atzilus as it's manifest in Biyah. And most neshamas are from Biyah, not from Atzilus of Biyah. So we could say that they are all rooted in the Atzilus mamish. But what do we mean? The neshamas are of Biyah. That is, the neshama in the body is from Biyah, but its origin is from Atzilus mamish. And even though the neshama invested in the body is in the Shem Havaya, like it says in the Eitz Chaim, Shar Shema, Shar Mendalit, the Alter Rebbe brings the source material, that the 10 kelim of pnimi of bria are the shemus of havaya, and that the neshamas draw out from the pnimis hakelim. But what we get ultimately is back to the concept of elokeinu. Is it elokeinu or is it havaya that is embedded within us? That it's only elokim, and the havaya quality is the havaya as it is expressed via the screen of elokim. Then there's a kitzer. We explain the idea of ve'akveni. And we explained that there has to be tshuva in three ways. One is to avoid evil, not to allow sins to separate. And then we make Hashem ours, like when we declare, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu. Elokeinu is tzimtzum hashchina. And even the chelik of havaya is only through through Elokeinu. Oisbeis. Now, we said that sins separate. That's a pasuk. Avanaseichem mavdilim. And the Igeres HaTshuva, from what we call Tanya, it explains from the pasuk in Bereshis that describes that Hashem blew the breath of life into the nostrils of Adam, that it is a depth, life-giving breath of life from Chelik Hashem. Like, for example, when a person blows on something, he blows. If there's something blocking, it prevents the air from making it to its destination. So too, if there's something that blocks Hashem's blowing of life-giving breath into the person, which is, again, even though nothing Gashmias can block Hashem, but what can is Avedis that can clog up the communication, like blocking up, like blocked up pipes. Why? Because it is oppositional to God's desire. And as it's explained in Rishis Chachma, that these are mechitzas, there can't be any physical barrier between a Jew and Hashem, but what can cause separation between Hashem is Avedis. Like it says that what can cause separation, that is, when the hashpah from Hashem is through a thick garment, and there is not so much of a revelation of godliness, because the garment is so thick that it completely conceals the body, so then Avedis can block it. That this is what causes the expression of the Shechina through the 10 Sfiras of Nega. This is the dividing barricade. Not a physical, but the Avedis. Like we know, the pasuk says in Hazinu, ki Yaakov chevel nachalo. So Yaakov is the rope of his inheritance. And if a person lowers himself to pursue his gashmiistic taivas, certainly ones that are prohibited, even ones that are permitted, that come from klipa, he causes Hashem to act in the same way. That is, he invests the hashpah of Hashem down in this low world into noiga. And when he does tshuva and he completely uproots his passion for material things and for the nonsense of this world, it also has an effect on Hashem. It's tashuv hey, it returns the hey back to its place. And this is what we mean when we say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu, that there's no separation between the person and Elokeinu. The second type of tshuva is the tshuva of asay tov. That is, that even though he has absolutely avoided evil, but he's minimal in his mitzvah observance. He doesn't extend himself in his Torah and his davening. There's a little bit of laziness. Regarding this, it says in Tillim, there's nobody who does good, not even one person. What does this mean? That he has removed the good of the world. Like it says in the pasuk in Yeshaya, Imru tzaddik hitov, the tzaddik says it is good, that the level of tzaddik is to be attached with Hashem, to attach the level of seviv kolam and to radiate within mamali kolam. That's yichud kutshabrichu v'shchinte. And this is what it means that we describe the person as an oived elokim. Like it's explained in Tanya in chapter 15, like working leather. You take the crass, gruff skin of an animal and you turn it into the very soft leather that you can make shoes from. That is, you work it until you evoke it. In the same way, a person has to work himself to do the good, to battle with his natural tendencies. And through this, he draws down the Yichud Elyon, the Shemesh U'Magen, the sun and its screen, our Havai Nelikim, that the screen should not block it out. Similarly, when you blend Adni and Havaya and you sweeten the Gevudas through the Chasadim, which is the Ikar Inyan of Yichud, and therefore, when we say there's no one who does good, we mean there's no one who does it properly. Like it's explained in the Zohar, that the fire burns the world with a fiery flame. That's what it means. Not that they're not doing what they're supposed to, but it's not done properly. It's not done with this enthusiasm. The revelation of Orin Seif, Seviv Kolam and Mamalik Kolam. And therefore, the Gvudas of Mamalik Kolam would be overturned. And this is what it says in the Zohar, that Rabbi Yossi would declare, less labor puma, there's nothing to be said, meaning this at this higher level where there's this great deficiency, this pagam, meaning a person has a lofty neshama. So his chet, his sin, annuls it. And his asay toiv, he's not as enthusiastic, he's not constantly growing, he's not oivid elikim. So there's a great collapse because he also winds up not avoiding evil. Like it says, the Adam Eitz Asada, what does this mean? That the root of the soul of the person is the eitz in the field that God blesses. What does this mean? Like we have the idea that a tree produces fruit. And the Zohar explains that this is the root of the neshama, of this tree, that it's in the field that Hashem blesses. So there are fruits, just like it is in the physical world, there's fruits in the spiritual world. What are the fruits in the spiritual world? These are the loftiest of levels. But when they fall down and they uproot the whole thing. And the fruit falls far from the tree, more than it would have otherwise grown, because when it's so high, it falls so far away. According to its height is how far away it falls. So too in the idea of the Eitz HaChaim of the Neshamas, because when it says that the Yidden were the initial purpose of all of creation, and that is the highest level. So when they fall hard. Similarly, also in the idea of Shviras HaKelim from the world of Tovu, that they are rooted in the highest of levels, and therefore they fall to the lowest of levels. And that's why the vegetation can give life to the animal and the animal to the human, because it is of a loftier origin, even though when it's manifest down here, of course, the animal appears to be higher than the vegetation and the human higher than the animal. And that's why when there is a deficiency or a violation of the neshama, for example, the person who's a great Talmid Chacham, who's not invested fully in Asay Tov, so his Avera is greater than that done by the average person. Like the story in the Gemara of the Tana who said that when I walk by and people don't see me learning, and it's only because he was really exhausted, so Rabbi Yochanan was fearful that people would see him not davening or learning at some moment, and they would take this as some sort of excuse not to, because he had to be at that loftier level. And this is not a contradiction to what it says, that if a person is in violation of a mitzvah's aseh, that is, he misses out on a mitzvah opportunity, and he does tshuva, he will not have to worry, so to speak. He will be forgiven. Wherewith a lois aseh, even if he does tshuva, he still has to wait for Yom Kippur. So this might suggest that missing out on a mitzvah's aseh is, quote, not such a bad thing. But again, as Alter Rebbe writes in the first letter of the Igeres HaTshuva, that this mistake should not be made, because this person has missed out on bringing light into the world, and therefore there's no leniency that should be derived from this behavior. or this consequence. However, in order that the person do tshuva, that he fill his light that was missing when he missed out on a mitzvah, for this he has to do an intense tshuva because he missed out on something. And this tshuva is what he enunciates when he makes the request in davening, Baruch atah Hashem, meaning that the request of the tshuva for missing out on something is to attach himself to Shem Havaya, which is Seviv Kol Almin, and a level of Makif. And this is a level that is higher than Elokeinu, which is Mamalik Kol Almin. And that's because mitzvah saseh, mitzvah saseh are linked to Shem Havaya. And therefore, in order to draw it down through a mitzvah, to attach ourselves to Hashem, like it's explained in the Igeres HaTshuva in chapter 8, that since the spirit of purity overcame the person and purified him, so he can do tshuva and he can return to Havaya Baruch, and he can elevate himself to this higher level and attach himself with this wondrous unity like it was before he did this Aveda. And that is to be subsumed in Shem Havaya. Again, like we talked about, that even though whenever we talk about Hashem being, quote, ours, it's always in the level of Elokeinu. And here it seems to suggest it's Havaya, but it's Havaya as it's manifest in Elokeinu. Now we're on Dafai and Dalit. This is the level of Havaya before it's manifest in the Midos. And this is what Yaakov said when he requested Hashem should be to me an Elokim. That is, Havaya Levada, each itself should be Elokim. And even more so, we have these two levels, Havaya and Adni. That is, the Adni is dominant. And then we have Adni B'Havaya, that the Havaya is dominant. And this is this level of tshuva in the Aseh Toiv, that he does the mitzvahs with Simcha and Tuv Leiv, and not just by rote. Perish, Kitzer, we say that a person can become separated, like it's explained in the Igeres HaTshuva, because we are linked to Hashem, and tshuva on the level of Aseh Toiv is to join Seviv Kolam and Malik Kolam to become an Ovid Elokim, like the field that nourishes the animal, that nourishes the person, and this allows us to be subsumed within Havaya Mamish.